Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Nahmaduhu wa nusalli ala rasulihil kareem amma ba'd. So Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam for some 3 years, he does what is called the dawah in secret. Up until then, he's not been ordered or commanded by Allah to preach openly. So individually, he's going to people, friends, relatives, people he knows, and he is individually going one by one and asked and invited them and speaking to them about Islam. In that time, as we discussed, some of the great Sahaba had accepted. There's 9 out of the 10 Ashra Mubashara accepted during that time. Remember? Abu Bakr, Uthman, Ali, Talha, Sa'id, Abdul Rahman bin Auf, Abu Ubaidah bin al-Jarrah, Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas. Who else? Who we missing? Huh? Start again. Abu Bakr, he accepted. Umar didn't accept at that time. Uthman, Ali, Talha bin Ubaidillah, Zubair bin Awwam, Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas, Sa'id ibn Zayd. Then Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah and Abdul Rahman ibn Auf. So 9 out of the 10 had accepted. Ibn Mas'ud and others also accepted. So the only one, the only from the 10 Ashra Bashara was Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anh. So after 3 years now the command came. قُلْ إِنِّي أَنَا النَّذِيرُ الْمُبِينُ. Right? وَانذِرْ عَشِيرَتَكَ الْأَقْرَبِينَ. That now go and warn your relatives. وَخْفِضْ جَنَاحَكَ لِمَنِ اتَّبَعَكَ مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. And warn your relatives and lower your wing in kindness unto those believers who follow you. And say, I am a plain warner. So Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam went on Mount Safa and he cried out, Ya Sabaha. When that was a cry, the Arabs were familiar with that. When someone would say Ya Sabaha, that would mean that there's an impending threat. There's a threat coming now. There's an army. Remember in those days there's no no YouTube or no cell phones. So you'll have people on the watch out. And the people on the lookout who would then shout, Ya Sabaha, so that gives you that there's a threat now. Somebody's coming, some grave news. So everyone joined, everyone came and ran to Mount Safa. When they got there, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he is on Mount Safa, so he can see what is behind, and they're in front of him. And then he addressed them, O sons of Abdul Muttalib, O sons of Fihr, O sons of Ka'b. And then he said, if I were to tell you that some horsemen were advancing to attack you from the other side of this hill, would you believe me? Now the Arabs, they're practical minded, right? They're looking at who's standing there. Muhammad, as-Sadiq al-Amin, the truthful one, trustworthy. So of course he's not going to lie. So then they said, yes. Allahu Akbar. This was a brilliant, way of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam presenting Islam to all of them. But he's telling them, that if I were to tell you that there's an enemy coming, would you believe me? Yes, we would believe you in that. So he's getting their attention that I'm telling you of something that's even greater than an enemy. It's greater than a physical force that's coming to attack you. And that is what? The spiritual force. That is the shaitan. And that's the disbelief that you're in. So then he tells them and he invites them to Islam. They listen. Abu Lahab, however, he didn't listen. And Abu Lahab, may you perish. Tabban laka sa'irul yawm alihada jama'tana. Woe to you. Basically, you've wasted our entire day. Is this what you have brought us here for? And then the verses came down. Tabbat yada abi lahabin wa tab. He spoke. He tried to embarrass the messenger. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala embarrasses him. Allah criticizes him, disgraces him until the day of judgment. Now, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam starts preaching openly. In the streets of Makkah and everywhere else, they start speaking. For a while, they didn't say anything to him. But what was the crunch? When he started speaking ill of their gods, their so-called gods. When he started speaking ill of their idols, that was what changed the whole matter. And now they started opposing him. That was when they went to Abu Talib. Now Abu Talib, he's the uncle of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah's messenger was under his care. When after the death of Abdul Muttalib. And Abu Talib, they went to Abu Talib and said, please, tell your nephew this. Don't criticize our gods. You can do anything, but just don't criticize our gods. Abu Talib didn't worry. He nothing could say. And what happened? If you look at the Seerah, as long as Abu Talib was alive, they tried to harm him, but outright to go to kill the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they couldn't do that because they knew Abu Talib, was a man is one of their leaders, right? So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam continued. Abu Talib, he basically ignored these individuals, and then once again they came. The leading people of the Quraysh came and approached Abu Talib and said, Abu Talib, you're an old person. We hold you in high esteem. We asked you to restrain your nephew, but you did nothing. By God, we cannot tolerate any longer that our fathers should be denounced, and we should be called ignoramuses, and our gods insulted. Either you stop him, or we will fight both you until one of us perishes. We'll fight both of you. So then Abu Talib sent for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he said, "Oh son, oh my son of my brother, the people have threatened me," and he spoke of what they had mentioned. Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, at that time, he thought that his uncle now would give him up, right? And give him up means that he knows that as long as his uncle says, he's under my care, nobody would harm him, right? You couldn't go and as I said, if you look at the Seerah, the plan to assassinate totally Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was before the Hijrah, right? Before he migrated. They boycotted, they did stuff as we will see to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but to outright to try to kill him, they couldn't do that as long as Abu Talib was alive. So at that time, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Allahu Akbar, he said, "Oh my uncle, by Allah, if they were to place the sun in my right hand and the moon in my left hand and ask me to abandon this course, I would not turn from it until Allah makes me victorious, until Allah makes it victorious, or I perish therein." And then tears came to the Messenger's eyes, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he got up to walk away. Abu Talib, seeing the sorrow of the Messenger, he said, "Come back, O my nephew." And then he said, "Go where you please and say what you will. Go where you please and say what you will. By Allah, I will never deliver you to your enemies." Now, this got the Meccans even more angry. What they started to do was each tribe, they started to harass and punish those from their tribe who had accepted Islam. Bilal was a slave. Then you had the slaves who had no one. Slaves who had no one. So Bilal is the slave of Umayyah. As we learned famous stories, Bilal will be dragged through the streets of Makkah al-Mukarramah. A heavy boulder will be placed on his chest. And they will say to him, "You will lie here till you die or deny Muhammad and worship Lat and Uzza, the idols." And all Bilal will say is, "Ahadun ahad, ahadun ahad, one Allah, one Allah." Abu Bakr then finally, Abu Bakr went and he purchased him and he freed him. Ammar bin Yasir and his family, his parents, right? Yasir and Sumayya radiallahu ta'ala anha, they face much hardship as well. Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, all he could do was pass and isbir ya ala Yasir. Oh family of Yasir, have patience. Your destination is Jannah. And then Sumayya becomes the first martyr in Islam, and Abu Jahl, he kills her. Musab bin Umair, for those of the young children the youngsters who like to be pampered, it's been mentioned that Musab bin Umair was the most well-dressed of young men in Mecca. His mother would look handsomely upon him. It says that you would know Musab bin Umair passed by a street by the sweet scent of the itar that he used to wear. You would smell, Musab passed across here. He heard about Islam. He went, he accepted. Uthman bin Talha once saw him praying and then went and disclosed the secret, Musab's secret, to his mother. And then she seized him and she imprisoned him. And then finally Musab radiallahu, and then he went to Abyssinia. And also he was amongst he was the one that after that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam sent to Medina in the early stages. And then he's the one who was martyred in Badr, in Uhud, sorry. Uthman bin Affan radiallahu anhu as well. His uncle Hakam ibn Abil As, he tied him up. And he said to him, "Have you renounced the faith of your forefathers for a new religion?" And Uthman said, "By Allah, I will never renounce this." Khabbab radiallahu anhu, one afterwards, in the time of Umar, when he showed the Sahaba his back, it was just basically the flesh had all eaten out because of the torture. It says that once they kindled a fire and they dragged me into it, while a man kept me down by placing his foot on my chest. So basically all the fat, everything was burnt from his back. There was nothing there. Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself, he had to undergo hardship. One is, when you start calling a person a madman, that hurts, right? Here is Muhammad al-Amin as-Sadiq, the most intelligent human being, and he's being called a liar. He's being called a poet. He's being insulted. He's being abused. He's being called a sorcerer. On one occasion, they went, and Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam was in the haram, and they pulled at the sheet of the cloth hanging around his neck, and they nearly choked him to death. Sayyidina Abu Bakr jumped in. Often we don't hear of we think that Abu Bakr was an old man, or we hear about Umar, courageous, right? Ali, courageous. Usman, courageous. We think Abu Bakr, Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu once said, you want to know who's the most courageous? And the people said, it's you. It's when he was the Khalif, right? So he goes, it's you, right? He said, who's the most courageous? They said, it's you. He said, no. Let me tell you who's the most courageous. Abu Bakr. One day, the Prophet ﷺ was in the haram, and they pulled at the cloth of Rasulullah ﷺ, and they started abusing him and physically hitting him. And Abu Bakr jumped into the midst of them. And he said, أَتَقْتُلُونَ رَجُلًا أَن يَقُولَ رَبِّيَ اللَّهِ. The man from the Ali Fir'aun, the people of Fir'aun, when he went and the people wanted to kill Musa, alayhi salam, he went to the people and said, are you just going to kill a man because he says that his Lord is Allah? But Sayyidina Ali would say that man was hiding his faith. He never disclosed he's a Muslim. But Abu Bakr went into the midst of them and professing his faith and also telling them to leave the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam alone. Abu Bakr on one occasion too, they beat him so much, it says that his face was injured and you could not even distinguish the nose from the eyes from the nose of his swollen face. He fell unconscious. He was taken to a home. When he awoke, when he regained consciousness, his mother was there. His mother at the time wasn't a Muslim. And there was one lady who was a Muslim who was standing there. As soon as he regains consciousness, he said, what has happened to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam? How is he? And his mother is telling him, eat, boy, eat, eat, son, have something. And then he's looking. And then Jamil, she's there, she said, she points, because she didn't want to disclose how Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was or where he was. So then Abu Bakr said, no problem, that's my mother. She's not going to say anything. And then she said, oh, he's in such a house. So Abu Bakr says, I'm not going to eat until you take me to see the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then they waited. When the road was clear, they took him to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then he said, oh, Messenger of Allah, pray for my mother. Pray for my mother. And he prayed for her. She accepted Islam. So now Abu Bakr has a distinction of that one Sahabi. His parents were Muslim. His children are also Muslim. It didn't happen with all the Sahaba. His parents were Muslim. His children were Muslim. He of course is a Muslim. So the Quraysh now they're wondering what to do. The Hajj season was approaching, and when Hajj approaches, it means that people from all over different parts of the Arabian Peninsula would come. So they're wondering now, what should we do? That this Muhammad is going to go and he's going to say these things. Walid bin Mughira is one of the respected elders of the Quraysh. So they go to him, and he then said to them, let me tell you something. He's not a poet. I know poetry. This is not poetry. This is not magic. This is not this. And then finally they said, okay, you know what? We'll call him a sorcerer. Because what he is doing is he is creating a rift between father and son, between husband and wife, between father and children, all of these things, between brothers. So we'll call him a sorcerer. So the plan was that when the people come to Makkah for Hajj, they will tell them that, see, there's a man here who's a sorcerer, don't go near him. And that's what they started to do. But Allah's Messenger still continued inviting. One day it so happened that as he was praying in the Kaaba, he was praying by the Kaaba, Utbah ibn Abi Mu'ayt went, and the fetus of a camel, right? The fetus of a camel he took, and when the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam was in sajda, he laid it on his back and his shoulders. And then Fatima radiallahu anha came and she removed it from him. So those were the difficulties he had to go through. One day, it so happened that Abu Jahl went and said many harsh words and insulted the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah's Messenger didn't answer him back. At that time, Hamza wasn't a Muslim, radiallahu anh, and he was one, he was one of those individuals who would go for hunting and all of these things. So he says Hamza, radiallahu anh, was returning from hunting when one of the slave girls came and said, you should have been there and seen what Abu Jahl said and did to your nephew. So when he heard the story, he went, Allahu Akbar, these are the heroes of Islam. He went in the midst of everyone, and Abu Jahl is one of the leaders, and he's sitting there. And Hamza went and he slapped him, he hit him, right? And he struck the bow upon his head, and he said, dare you insult and abuse him when I follow his religion and what he says? So Abu Jahl kept quiet. That was a big loss for these individuals, because now Hamza is one of these brave men, and Hamza now accepts Islam. Then after that, there was a time that Utbah bin Rabi, another one of the leaders of the Quraysh, he went to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said to the Quraysh, let me go and speak to him. So he went to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he said, oh my nephew, you know the worthy position you enjoy amongst us, but now there's this rift, you're insulting our gods, etc. Tell me, what do you want? What do you want? You want to become the wealthiest? We'll give you the most money. You want to become the king? We'll make you king. You want to get married to a beautiful woman? We'll get the most beautiful woman and get you married. Whatever you want, you just say, but just don't call our gods bad. Allah's Messenger said, have you said enough now? Are you finished? He said, yes. He said, listen to me. And he started, Hamim, Tanzilun min ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Kitabun fussilat ayatuh. The beginning verse of Surah Hamim. And when he says that Utbah was sitting down and he was reclining. And then he sat up and he listened. And then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam went up. So after one page comes the punishment of the Ad and Thamud. And when he got there, he said, stop, enough. Because he now got frightened that the punishment was going to come upon them as well. And the Quraysh were there watching and they're seeing the whole change on his face. And when Utbah went back to them, he said, listen, he told the people, listen, I have never heard a discourse like this. And I swear by Allah, I swear by God, that this is neither poetry, nor spells, nor witchcraft. Take my advice and let this man be. Take my advice and let this man be. See, there were a number of people in the Quraysh, especially the older ones, who were of this opinion as well, that leave Muhammad alone. Leave him alone, because if Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam becomes victorious, that means we're victorious, because he's our own. We can have pride that this is our Qurayshi boy. Someone from Sawan, from from Nur-e-Islam, does something, gets a scholarship. All of us become happy. That's our boy, right? Someone does something, invents something. So Abdullah invents something. We all become happy. That's our homegrown. So a lot of them, especially the older ones, they're of that. Let's leave him. If he becomes victorious, we become victorious. But a lot of the others were, no. He's insulting our gods. And then what we did right today, وَإِن تُطِعْ أَكْثَرَ مَنْ فِي الْأَرْضِ, then you go and you start joining with the majority instead of standing for what you believe. And then these same individuals, then they passed away in kufr. So inshallah, we continue now tomorrow with the first migration to Abyssinia. Subhanallah.